Hello?
Yeah, somebody here, yeah.
Yes, you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
We hear you.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we see the screen.
Okay, amazing. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Good evening to everyone. So tonight it's discussion is my brother wasn't able to come tonight. So tonight we'll do something, a crash course on Makvois. So what we have in front of us over here is a Shulchan Aruch, which the second chelik of Shulchan Aruch is Yeridea, and then in Yeridea it's the 201st siman. It discusses the halachis of mikveh. The entire siman is devoted to these halachis. There are 75 sifim. So we're just going to skip around to try to get to the main halachis of mikveh, so we could get some basic understanding of what a mikveh has to be made of. It can't just be a regular swimming pool, but again, we're talking about a mikveh for women in Hatayra, and any in Hatayra, any person. There was many different people which need to go to mikveh. So they will also need a proper mikveh. So the first halacha which we're discussing is starts over here, where the finger is. It says, "Ein isha elam tumasa berechitza b'merchatz." A woman cannot become, after she becomes a nida, she cannot become tar, pure from tuma berechitza b'merchatz, just by washing herself in a bathhouse. That's not enough. Even if all the waters of the world came upon her, she took all the showers, she still remains in impurity. And somebody who has relation with her is chayiv karas. What does she have to do? She has to immerse her whole body in one shot, in waters of a mikveh. A mikveh, like we're going to see, a mikveh is rainwater, which is gathered. Mikveh, the word mikveh means gathered. It says that mikveh mayim kara yamim. It says in the beginning of when Hashem created the world, he said that in the mikveh mayim, he called it yam, he called the seas a mikveh mayim. So the Targum says mikveh mayim, mikveh means a gathering, knishus maya, gathering of water. So a mikveh, the word mikveh means a gathering of water, and it comes from the rain. Rainwater which is gathered in one spot. Another way she could become pure is through immersing herself all in one shot in a mayin. A mayin is a spring, a natural spring which comes out of the ground. That is also kosher for a mikveh, but it has to have a certain amount. Sheish b'mem sa. They have to have the shear of 40 sa. 40 sa is not a major amount. It's not a major amount. It's a few hundred liters, or I should say gallons. Sheish b'mem sa v'shura amal reim shalosh amas. The way they would measure it is they would put it. You can if you would have an exact measurement. If you want to talk about cubic measurements, so you would have 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot, which that's an amma. Amma is 1.5 foot according to the Ram Chayna, and it's 3 ammas high, so that's 4.5 feet high. That is the amount of a 40 sa. B'meruba and square. B'amma b'ashisha tvachim b'chatzi etzba. The amma includes 6 tvachim and a half etzba. Okay, so that's just the measurements. Let's not get too involved in the measurements, but that is a very important thing. So the first halacha which we know is that it has to be 40 sa. There has to be a certain amount of water in order to be able to immerse yourself in mikveh to become tar, and that amount is 40 sa. So there's different opinions about exactly how much 40 sa is. So by mikveh, we're actually more stringent. We take the most stringent opinion. So we have to make sure we have that amount. The reason for that amount is because because we learn out that it has to be the amount, the size that a person would be able to be table in it. And the amount the person is able to be table in is 40 sa. Okay, so that's the first halacha. If there's no 40 sa, there's no starter in a mikveh. Now, he gave certain dimensions. He said, even if it's not exactly those dimensions, he says, as long as it equals 40 sa, if it's a little bit wider, not that tall, it's also kosher. As long as she's able to entirely immerse her body. And now, just for the record, nowadays when they build mikvahs, they put more than memsa, and usually twice and 3 times the amount of memsa. So usually you don't have this issue. Memsa is not a major amount. And he continues, and I don't want to get too much into the measurements over here, but he continues that towards the end, he says, that the pit where you're putting the water in needs to be big enough that what happens is, if you have a place which you can only hold exactly 40 sa, so what happens when you walk into there and your table and there, the water which is in there is going to start leaving the pit, because the pit only holds exactly 40 sa. And when the person comes in, the person takes up space also, so some water starts leaving. So that's a problem. Water can't be leaving. So we need to make sure that the pit is a little bigger. Even if you have 40 sa, you have to make sure that the walls of the pit are a little higher, that this way when the person goes inside, we don't lose some of the water. Okay, now let's go to the next sif. Okay, so we see 2 things. There was 2 points in Sif Aleph. Sif Aleph is number 1, a mikveh has to have 40 sa. Number 2 is that the walls have to be tall enough that when the person walks in it, we don't lose some of the water. Okay, now, base. We're talking about, there's a difference between a mikveh made out of rainwater to a mikveh made from a spring. A mikveh made from a spring, the water is allowed to be something called zeichlum. Zeichlum is a very important word in the terminology of mikveh. Zeichlum means that it's flowing, which means the water is allowed to be flowing. It doesn't have to be staying in one place if it's coming from a spring. The water is kosher if the woman's table in something which is, where the water is flowing. So then it is still okay as long as it comes from a spring. However, a make shamim, however, the make shamim is the rainwater is not metar unless it's bashbeiden, it's staying in one place. Very important. So it's very important because our mikvahs are usually rainwater. So most of our mikvahs are rainwater. Back in the day, they used to be table and by a spring, by rivers, but nowadays we use rainwater. So by rainwater, we have to make sure that the water stays in one place. And practically what's that mean? It means that the mikveh cannot be leaking. We can't have the water leaking in any way. You have to make sure that the water is staying in its place. So therefore they have to build, also the mikveh, they build it, the different contractors, when they build the mikvahs, they make sure to build the mikveh with extra strong walls. Sometimes when they build the mikveh, they build the walls, they build the cement. Those who know construction a little bit. So they build the cement on all 4 walls, all in one shot. It's not so easy to do. The reason why they do that, they pour the cement all in one shot, is in order that all the 4 walls should be one piece. And therefore it's harder for anything it's stronger and harder for any leaks to happen. Because if you pour it separate 4 walls, so maybe, it could go between the walls, or the wall is not as strong. So there's different things. They put something in the walls called rebar to strengthen it. They do many different tricks to be able to make sure that the walls are extra strong. There shouldn't be any leaking. But the reason is because if Chas Shalom a mikveh has leaks, so then it's not kosher for as a mikveh. has to be bashbeiden. So the key words over here is zeichlin and ashbeiden. Zeichlin means it's flowing. A spring could be flowing. It's kosher, it's flowing. But a make shamim, water, which is a rainwater, is not tar, is not kosher, unless it's bashbeiden, it's flowing in one place. Okay. Okay, let's continue over here. Okay. And then he discusses, we're not going to get too involved over here. He discusses what about rivers. Rivers is another discussion. It's a very interesting discussion because rivers, many rivers, you have to find out the actual source of the river. Many rivers start from a spring. So since they start from a spring, so therefore since they start from a spring, so therefore possibly they could be kosher even though they are flowing and they're not in one place. But this is something which a Rav has to be contacted to know exactly for the situation. It could be negea for people who go away for vacation and they go to places where there is no regular mikveh. It's negea for shluchim. It's negea for a lot of people. What is the din by when concerning a river and lakes and oceans? These are all important questions. Negea for not is negea also, by the way. These things are also negea to being tevel a kalim, to be tevel utensils which you bought from a guy. Also need to be min hatayra, need to be immersed in a mikveh which is kosher, just like this. So these halachas are also negea, are also relevant to being tevel your utensils, which mean hatayra, they need a kosher mikveh. So that's important for today too. So you have to make sure that when you tevel your kalim, you make sure that it's a kosher mikveh. It's not just a regular, mikveh. You have to make sure that it is a properly made. Generally, mikvahs are very complicated and need to be made by special experts who are experts, especially in this field. It's not just any Rav is because not necessarily does the Rav know construction, all the details of how to build a mikveh if they're not experts in the realm and the field of mikvahs. So it's very important to ask who is in charge of the mikveh and to know what's going on with the mikveh, not just to use just any mikveh that is available. Okay, now we're holding Siv Gimel. There's another important point of mikveh. So therefore, so far we learned in the first halacha that there is a certain shear, there's a certain amount of water which the mikveh has to have. It's called memsa. Then we learned in the second sif, we learned about that a rainwater mikveh has to be in one place, cannot be moving, cannot be leaking, cannot be leaving the area where it finds itself. It has to be bashbeiden, has to be staying in one place. It cannot be zeichlin, cannot be going out. Now we're up to another din in mikvahs in Siv Gimel, and he says that these are bayim sa, these 40 sash amr which we mentioned, which a mikvah needs to have. Sada shaleyu shuvim, they cannot be drawn water. Shemheim shuvim psulim. If they are drawn water, they are pasul, they're invalid. It's an invalid mikvah. What does that mean? It means that if you took the water using a vessel, a utensil, any utensil, you took a cup, you took a kvart, anything, and you filled it up with water, even if you filled it up from rainwater, but once you picked it up with once it went into a keli, into a vessel, even if you didn't pick it up, but you were interested in it being in that utensil, and then the water goes to the mikveh, the water is considered shuvim and is invalid to fill up a mikveh. The water has to come directly from the sky, directly into the mikveh. It cannot go through any utensil on the way. If it goes through any keli on the way, then it is deemed shuvim and it is pasul. And the Ramah says, "Im kala mikveh hi shuvim pasul min hatayra." If the whole mikveh is shuvim, is made up of water which went through a keli, went through a utensil, it is pasul min hatayra. Min hatayra is a pasul. And therefore, if you have any suffix in this mikveh, if this mikveh was filled up with rainwater or with sh'uvim, with water which went through a keli, so we have to be machmir because it's a suffix min hatayra. Mikveh kasher, but if most of the mikveh is kasher, if most of the mikveh comes from rainwater, only a little bit is coming from water which came through from a utensil, then that's only midrabbanon sekel l'kula. In other words, if the entire mikveh is made up of water which is sh'uvim, which went through a keli, then it's possible in atayra. If only a smaller amount, the smaller amount of the mikveh, most of the mikveh is made up of rainwater, but a smaller amount of the mikveh is made up of sh'uvim, so the din is that it is only possible midrabbanon. Okay, so this is the third din. Again, the first din is there has to be memsa, there has to be the amount of memsa. The second din is that the rainwater has to be bashbeidin, has to be in one place, can't be leaking. And the third din is that the water has to come directly from the rain, not through a utensil, or else that's called she'uvim, and it's possible. So those are the three dinim we learned so far about mikvahs, which is very important dinim. Okay, we're going to skip a little bit ahead over here. We're going to go to this sifo here. He says that there's another din. We just mentioned that the water which is coming to the mikveh cannot come through a keli, cannot come through a utensil on its way into the mikveh. Over here we're discussing another thing that is very similar, but it's a different idea, that these 40 sa of the mikveh cannot be in a keli, cannot be in a utensil. Even if 40 sa of rainwater falls right into the keli, you cannot be toivel in the keli. This is a din that the person cannot immerse himself in a keli. Person cannot immerse himself in a keli. If he's in a keli, then it's not a good mikveh. Okay, so let's skip a little bit ahead over here. We're going to go to Sif Tes Vav. Okay, this sif over here is now continuing this idea about sh'uvim, which we mentioned that the water which is coming to the mikveh cannot be sh'uvim. Again, sh'uvim means anything which came through a keli, through a utensil, before it reached the mikveh. So he says that there is that if there is already 40 sa in the mikveh, then as long as you already have the full amount of a complete mikveh, so then there is no problem to pour as much sh'uvim as you want into that mikveh, and you're able to put everything into the mikveh, into the 40 sa, and that water which you poured in is also altogether considered a kosher mikveh. That's what he says over here. Mikveh sheish b'arbayim sa, if you have a mikveh which has 40 sa, and so to a mayin kosher, also a spring. Over here, actually, a spring in this situation does not need to have 40 sa, even if it just has one drop. Even if the spring just has one drop, you're able to yachol, you're able to lishav kol mash yitza, you're able to draw whatever you want, litin l'seicha, to put into it, the heim kshedim, and they're kosher. The water which you poured in, it does not invalidate the 40 sa which was there, does not invalidate the spring. Even though, let's say you have 40 sa, exactly 40 sa, and you poured 80 sa of sh'uvim water which went through utensil. He says it doesn't make a difference. As long as you have a core of 40 sa, then the mikveh, any water which you pour into it afterwards, all remains kosher. It all remains kosher. If you have 40 sa, and so too if you have a spring, even one drop of a spring, special power of a spring, you can pour whatever, how much sh'uvim you want into it, it still remains kosher. Okay, let's skip over here. But if you do not have 40 sa in the mikveh, sorry, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay, so he says, but if you do not have 40 sa in the mikveh, you have less than 40 sa of rainwater, So even it's just missing one drop less than 40 sa, it's not a complete kosher mikveh. So then, if 3 lugim mayim fall into it, like a few liters, it's already a problem. Psalur makes a puzzle with the rabbanon. Okay, so that's why I have to be careful that when they're filling up the mikveh, practically this means that when they're filling up the mikveh for the 40 sa, the rainwater is coming into the mikveh, and you don't have 40 sa yet, so you have to be careful that there's no seltzer bottles or water bottles nearby or something, or any water nearby, and maybe the workers decide to, by mistake, pour into it or something. You have to watch it and to make sure that it's sealed off, that nobody could pour any other water besides for the rainwater flowing into it. No other water should come into the mikveh, because if even gimel lugim, which is just a few liters, fall into it, so then it is already a possible mikveh, invalid. But once you have 40 sa in the mikveh, so then you can add as much as you want, there's no problem. Okay. Now he adds, it says, so too, not only, he says, shuvim is not only if it comes through a vessel, but also if it comes from your hand. For example, you squeeze it out of a clothing which fell into the mikveh, and you squeezed out the water from there and it fell into the mikveh, so then it could also be a problem of shuvim. Just for the record, also before they fill up a mikveh with 40 sa from rainwater, so they make sure that the pit where the water is going to be coming into, they make sure that it is totally dry. They dry it as well as possible before anything is, because they don't want that maybe the walls, around the walls altogether, there's some moisture, and altogether it equals gimel sign. Very careful to dry around the walls, that there shouldn't be 3 lugin of water before the mikveh is filled with 40 sa. Okay, so now furthermore, he says, but these 3 lugim which fall in need to be, we'll skip to here, with these 3 lugim have to one has to come out, one has to come in right after the other one, before this first lug. There's 3 lugins, so one lug starts pouring, and before the one lug finishes, the second lug also starts, and then the third lug starts. But if you had a mind, like let's skip over here, but if you had a mind to put all the 3 lugim, he says even if it was a little bit by little bit for a long time, and it equals up to gimel lugim, it is an issue. Okay, let's continue on to Sif Chav Gimel. We're going to skip a little bit. We're going to go to Sif Chav Gimel. Okay. Now we're continuing discussing about these Gimel lugin, these 3 lugin, which we said that if the mikveh does not have yet 4 sayin, if 3 lugin of shuvim, which means water, which is has come through a utensil and falls into that mikveh, which doesn't have 40 sa, it's going to become puzzle. He says there's another condition over here about these 3 sayin, these 3 lugin. I'm sorry, Alam Kain, in Gimel lugin Pesim, these 3 lugin do not invalidate the mikveh. Elim Kain, Yushal Mayim, they have to be totally water. All the 3 lugin together. And their appearance also has to look like water. But therefore, if you had 3 lugin of water, all complete 3 lugin of water, what happened was wine fell into those 3 lugin mayim. Now they look like wine. You have 3 lugin of mayim, but they don't look like water. They look like wine. They don't invalidate it. So also if you have less than 3 lugim of water, of which is shuvim, and a little bit milk mixed into it and made it into 3 lugim. But since not all 3 lugim are made out of water, therefore they also cannot invalidate a mikveh. So the point is that a mikveh, in order to become possible for 3 lugim, the mikveh has to be that it does not have 40 sa, and also that the 3 lugim are totally water, and also they look like water. Now, let's go to move to the next sif, to sif chav daled. So he says it has to be water, but some things are considered like water. Let's say pickled water, mechvashim, mishlakis, or you cooked in it. Water which has a certain color, they all also considered water. Now, what we said earlier that it has to look like water means that it wasn't changed by something of substance, which means if you have wine, like we mentioned, wine is something of a juice of substance, so that would make the changing of the water, the color of the water, that would make that it should not be considered 3 lugin to pass a mikveh, invalidate a mikveh. But if it was just water just happened to get a color, so then it does not invalidate. It does invalidate. It's considered from the gimel lugim. Okay, now a very important thing over here, which is very, very important, and which negate to our mikvahs. If you have fruit juice, let's say, right? You have fruit juice, and you have 39 soin, 30 lamata soin, 39 soin. You need how many? You need 40 soin, right? But you only have 39 soin of rainwater, and then one of one saw, which is the 40th saw, fell in, but it wasn't rainwater, it was juice. So it does not it did not complete the mikveh. You don't have 40 saw because you need 40 saw of water. But let's say you had, so let's say you already had 40 saw, and it fell into it after you already have 40 saw of rainwater, then 1 saw of paydays fell into it, or fruit juice fell into it. So then, so now how many saw do you have? You have 41 saw. 40 saw is rainwater, and 1 saw is from the, let's say, wine. Okay, so now you come and you take out 1 saw from there. So how many saw you left with now? 40 saw. But how do you know what you took out when you took out that saw? Could be you took out wine, could be you took out rainwater, it's probably you took out a mixture of it. But still considered, so then we say it is kosher. This is what it's called, natal saw, but nasan saw, natal saw, you put a saw in and you took out a saw, so we say it's kosher. He says, even if you did it 19 times that you put in and you took out, which means you're left with the majority of the mikveh is rainwater, we're assuming. Majority of the mikveh is rainwater, 21 saw is rainwater, 19 saw is from water, which is from fruit juice. Mikveh is still kosher. So that limitation is only said about fruit juice. But mayim shuvim shenaflu salavem sak shedim. But if you have, let's say, 40 saw of kosher rainwater, 40 saw, and then shuvim water fell in. Shuvim water means water which went through a utensil. So you already had 40 saw of a kosher, you had a kosher mikveh, 40 saw of rainwater. And afterwards, mayim shuvim, not fruit juice, but shuvim, other water fell in, which is water which went through a utensil. So then he says that even if you take out and you put in, you take out from the mikveh and you put in and you take out, which means you always had 40 saw and you're always adding to 40 saw and you're taking out, let's say you have 40 saw of rainwater, and then you add 1 saw of shuvim, and then you take out 1 saw, and you keep on doing that, and for forever, it's always kosher. Now that's not so simple, because there are those who disagree with that, and they say, like the Shach, which the Shach says that's not the case. according to some Rishonim, the Ravid and the Rambam, and therefore we have to be careful even about that. Now, I just want to take a second to discuss this. It might be a little confusing what I'm saying, but I'll try to spend a little bit more time just to explain this. This will help you understand a little bit why the difference for many mikvahs, which there are going on in the world. So the way it works is like this: that the Ravid holds, if you have a mikveh, again, we'll start again. You have a mikveh. The share of a mikveh, we said, is how much? Is 40 sa. Okay, 40 sa. Now, 40 sa has to be made up of what? We said it has to be made up of rainwater. Okay, next. Now, we said that if you can add 1 sa to the 40 sa of shuvim. Shuvim, we said, means water which went through a utensil and came into the mikveh. Okay, that's called shuvim. So you're adding 1 sa of shuvim to mem sa, 40 sa of rainwater. Now, how many sa do we have left? We said now we have 41 sa. Okay. Now, the Ravid holds that if you take out now from this mixture of 41 sa, you take out 1 sa, now you're left with 40 sa. He holds it's kosher. It's still a good mikveh, even though it is possible that you took out, together with this sa which you took out also rainwater from it. Okay. He says that you're able to continue doing that. Now, let's say after you did that, you add another sa of shuvim for a second time. And now you have 41 sa again. And you take out again a sa, now you have 40 sa. So he says it's still kosher. You understand that now the second time when you took out the second sa, you understand that there's more shuvim probably mixed into this mixture of 40 sa which you have left. So he says that you could continue doing that back and forth for up to 19 times. In other words, that we assume, right? Remember, a mikveh is 40 sa, and we have 40. So 40 sa, the majority of 40 sa is 21 sa. So 19 would be the smaller amount of the mikveh. Would be the minority of the mem sa. So he says, as long as you did this 19 times, you're okay. But the moment you're going to do this 20 times, which means you're going to be putting 20 sa of shuvim in there, and each time you took out a sa afterwards, so then he says it's not kosher. Now, most Rishonim, like the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, they say that it is okay. It is kosher. But the Ravid holds it's not kosher. So the Shach says that we should be careful and we should try to keep to what the Shach said. Now that we know, this is what is called nasan sa v'natal sa. Nasan sa means you put in a sa, you add it to the 40 kosher sa, you added a sa of shuvim, but natal sa, and then afterwards you took it out, and you kept on doing that, and you did it more than 19 times. So now, according to the Ravid, it's not kosher. Now, by a mikveh, we try to keep to all the opinions of the Rishonim. We try the best we can, as best we can, even more so than in any other area in halacha. There's a tashbitz of one of the Rishonim which says we try to keep to all the opinions when we build a mikveh. So many Gdei Yisrael are trying to make sure that we follow this Ravid also. Now, where does it come in play? It comes in play like this. In our mikvahs today, let's just understand how our mikvahs today work. Our mikvahs are we actually have two pits. One pit is a pit which has the rainwater, the 40 sa of rainwater, which, like I said, is more than 40 sa in there, usually 80 sa, 120 sa, depending on each mikveh. Now, next to that mikveh is a mikveh full of city water. City water is obviously shuvim. It obviously went through utensils, or it probably went through utensils on the way to the mikveh. Okay, so we have two pits. One pit is the rainwater. One pit is the water which we actually are immersing ourselves in, which that's the water which comes from the city. That's the city water. Now, how does the city water become kosher water? So what we do is we make a hole between the two pits, between the pit of the rainwater and the pit of the city water, and that hole opens up, has to be a certain amount, like we're going to see. That's going to be, has a certain size, that hole. And once it's connected, so it's called hashaka. Hashaka means they're touching, so once they're touching, so then each one the rainwater makes kosher the water which is not rainwater, the city water, and makes it kosher. Like we already saw before, that if once you have 40 saw of kosher water, of rainwater, so then as much water as you add to the rainwater of the 40 saw, the rainwater, it is still kosher. Even though you're adding shulvim, the shulvim remains kosher. Now let's get back to what we're discussing over here with Nasan Salvanato Sa, with the Ravid. Now, according to the Ravid, he says that if the mixture of rainwater mixes for more than 19 times, so then, which means that there's a majority of shuvim which entered into the rainwater, and we took out from the rainwater, the majority of the rainwater was there, so then it is not a kasher mikveh. So what happens is, when you have a hole between the rainwater and the city water, so the water goes, when you're toivel, when you're immersing in that mikveh, so the water can mix between the rainwater. There's a mixture happening between the rainwater and the city water. The water is changing. So it is very possible that in the rainwater pit, there's no majority of rainwater anymore. It became full with the city water. And according to the Ravid, that would not be okay. Now again, remember, according to Shulchan Aruch, it is kosher, but the Shach says we should try to follow this opinion of the Ravid, and something which Gedei Yisrael we're trying to figure out how to do it, how to make sure that happens, and that's the reason for different mikvahs, and that's one of the famous things by Chabad mikvah, the mikvah which the Rebbe Rashab built. He built it one pit on top of the other pit. The pit with the rainwater is found under the pit with the city water which you immerse yourself in, and that's where they're connected. And the reasoning is because the top water is one of the reasonings is that the top water is hotter because again there's heating over there, and heat rises, and the lower water is cooler. So therefore, we assume that the cold water and the which is on under and the hot water which is on top are not going to mix as often. So therefore, this is one of the ideas of reason why we make a ber agavi ber, to make. The Rebbe Shab made such a mikveh was in order to make sure that we shouldn't be mixing between the waters on top of the waters under. So some people have different ideas. Some people, if you go to the Divrei Chaim mikvahs, which all the Sanzer, Eineklach, the descendants from the Sanzer, the Bavov, and obviously Tzanz, Kleisenberg, and all those are going that way. What they do is they actually open up the mikveh one time every day to make the hashaka, and then they close up that hole which is between the city water and the rainwater. They close up that hole. They just make the hashaka one moment, and then they close it up because they don't want the water to be mixing between the two. Again, that's their way of doing it. And many people in the world, they make a mikveh called Minchas Yitzchak mikveh, and they have a different way of doing it, that they make a mikveh one next to each other, and then they make that mikveh one on top of another. Many people make a different way of making a mikveh. That's a different discussion, the Chaznish mikveh. Okay, so that's just, I hope it was clear, but that's some of, that's the idea of ber agavi ber. So again, ber agavi ber is a hiddur, and this is the reason for it. But again, the halach is that it's not, we're not like the Raiva, but we try to follow as much as we can. So that's why different mikvahs are made differently. Okay, let's continue. The next halacha is that the water of the mikveh the water of the mikveh the water of the mikveh has water. The water could be changed. If the color changes, so then if the color changes, so then it is not a good mikveh. But the color again has to be changed by something which has substance, which is made, let's say from zaysim, from olives, or from wine. But if it comes from some residue, a residual of baskets of fruit baskets or something, so then that's not a problem. But if the water changes, the mikveh color changes, it is an issue. And that's why it's important to know what is going into a mikveh. Or just, you have to know when you're putting in coloring. Some people like to add, fancy mikvehs. They like to put on maybe some blue dye. You have to know what's going into a mikveh, what color it is. Again, if it's just from people taveling, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. It's not real substance. Okay, so let's move on to another halacha, a very important halacha in mikvahs, and that halacha is that a mikveh has to, the water which comes to the mikveh cannot have passed through and come to the mikveh from something which is called davar hamakabel tumah, something which is makabel tumah. It's different than coming through a utensil. Even the utensil usually is also something which can contract impurity. It's a vessel which is able to become impure. But there are some vessels which don't become impure, like certain stone vessels or very large vessels which do not become impure. And they would be an issue of shuvim if the water goes through them. But there would not be an issue. Let's say that vessel was upside down and the water was going over them. There would not be an issue of coming to the mikveh from something something which is able to contract impurities. Davar hamakabel tumah. So therefore, something like metal, even though it's not a utensil, it's not something I'm not able to receive anything. But the metal is something which can contract. Sorry.
Yeah, the metal is always makabel tumah. Always.
Yeah, exactly. Metal is always makabel tumah. So that's the saying that metal, even if it's a pshute kli mateches, even if it's something which is straight, which doesn't have any utensil receptacle part of it, still, if the water goes from the metal on the metal into the mikveh, it's also an issue. The issue is called davar hamakabel tumah. The mikveh can have a yaseh aidei davar hamakabel tumah. The mikveh water cannot come to the mikveh through something which is makabel tumah. Again, so that's why the pipes usually which the water is coming into the mikveh from, those pipes are usually made of a special type of PVC, which is not makabel tumah. Now again, even if it would be metal, there is situations where it shouldn't be a problem, because if it was made to be connected to the wall and it's connected to the ground, so then it's not an issue also. But l'chatchila, we try not to have any metal in the mikveh. So we try not to have such pipes. Try to make everything not makabel tumah. Again, also, even if it's from something which is davar makabel tumah, if it doesn't come directly into the mikveh from this thing which is makabel tumah, if it has a stop on the way, so then it is not considered as coming into the mikveh from something makabel tumah, since it came through on the way from something else. Okay, so now that's another important halacha which is very negea. That's one of the reasons why when the rainwater comes into the mikveh, it goes through hamshacha, something called hamshacha. If by your nearest mikveh you take a look, you ask the person over there. When the rainwater comes into the mikveh, it doesn't come directly. There's no pipe coming directly from the ceiling right into the mikveh, but it's on the side, and it flows on the ground into the mikveh. It flows on the ground into the mikveh, and it doesn't come directly in. And one of the reasons is because there should be something called amshacha. The water should flow on the ground before it comes directly into the mikveh. There shouldn't be any shilas of coming from something in the kabel tumah. If by mistake, let's say on the roof, they didn't realize somebody threw a can on the roof, a soda can, and the water is passing the soda can or something somewhere, and then it comes directly, let's say on the top, right where the pipe is coming down, there's a soda can stuck over there, and the water's coming directly from there. It shouldn't go directly into the mikveh. It should have it go through amshacha until it goes in the mikveh, then it shouldn't be a problem. There's another reason for amshacha. The other reason for amshacha is, like we're going to say, is that the that's by shuvim also shuvim also if the gimel lugim of shuvim comes into the mikveh through amshacha. Those gimel we mentioned before, they come into the mikveh if they came in through hamshacha, as long as not the whole mikveh that's coming into mikveh, but just let's say gimel lugim, where the minority of the mikveh comes through hamshacha, even though that water which coming into the mikveh is from shuvim, it's still a kasher mikveh. It's still a kasher mikveh as long as the majority of the mikveh is from davar is from a kasher mikveh, from make shamim, from rainwater. That's enough already to make it kosher. So that's another reason why we have the hamshacha. The hamshacha that's another reason why hamshacha. Okay, actually, this is sifim ches. That's where we talk about davar makabel tumah. We back up a little bit. Somebody wants to bring water to the mikveh. That thing which you're using to bring the water to the mikveh cannot be in davar hamakabel tumah. Cannot be something in makabel tumah. And he goes through it. He says that you shouldn't hold a daf. You shouldn't hold some board in order to bring it in. Because while you're holding it, your hand is a davar makabel tumah. Which means it can't even be supported by something in makabel tumah, even though you're not directly touching the water, but you're just holding a board, but your hand's holding it. Since your hand is davar makabel tumah, it's also a problem. And so to silon shamatach is a pipe which is made out of metal. Right, so pipes are very important to know what type of pipe. Some pipes also have niches and different things, which could be a shiloh also of shuvim, because it could be considered a keli possibly. So again, it has to be looked over and built by a rav who's a mumche in these things. Okay, so now there's another discussion, important discussion about mikvahs. We mentioned before. We mentioned the idea that the mikveh make shamim cannot be leaking, cannot be zeichlim. So the question is, what if it's leaking higher than the amount of 40 sa, which means you have 40 sa, and on top of them a shear of 40 sa, the amount of 40 sa, there is water coming out and leaking out. So there is a machlekes about this. If water which is leaking out zeichlim, which is flowing out, a leak which is higher than the shear of 40 sa, is that a problem or not? Those are machmidim, and the Ramah says yishlach shlevrei lechatchila. We have to listen to them lechatchila to close up that hole. Okay, and also when you close up that hole, you have to make sure you don't close it up with something in makabel tumah. Okay, so that's another important din. Again, there is another important din. That's the shear. What's the shear? We were mentioning about the hashaka when we have a mikveh of city water, a mikveh of shuvim, right, and a mikveh next to it of make shamim. There has to be a certain amount. Has to be kisheferes haneid. Sheferes haneid means that you're able to put your two fingers. After your thumb, that your pointing finger and your middle fingers, you put them together, and you're able to put them in a circle. In that circle around, that's the amount of sheferes haneid. That's the connection. That's how big it has to be. That's how big it has to be in order to connect the two mikvahs. So then again we said that if you want to be machshir a mikveh, this is where we said this is the idea of hashaka habal hachshir mikveh shov, a mikveh of shov, which is drawn water from mikveh shov, from a complete water of 40 sa, she'eni shov, which is rainwater, is not a shov. So he says that you could even use, even here's breath, but the Rama says that it is possible that you can need a shefet sanait, and that's what we do with Poil. That's what we just discussed just now. Okay, so this, just to make a synopsis, since we don't have so much time left, let's just make a synopsis of what we mentioned, different halachas, which we learned about what a mikveh has to have. Number one, a mikveh has to have 40 sa, has to have that measurement. It's missing even one drop, it's not okay. Number two, a mikveh, which is rainwater, has to be ba'ajbeidin, has to be in one place. Number three, you cannot, the water cannot come to the mikveh through a keli, which would be a problem with shulin, through a utensil. Also, you cannot be toivel in a keli. You cannot immerse yourself in, even if the 40 cells is found in the keli. The next thing we said is that if you have 40 sa of a mikveh, a kosher mikveh, so then you can pour in as much as you want, as long as the water doesn't leave us. You can pour in as much as you want. According to everyone, it is a kosher mikveh, even though you have much more shulvim than the 40 sa, as long as you have those original 40 sa still in the mikveh. But if there's no 40 sa, we said, then shulvim makes it, validates it, validates the mikveh, even if it's missing even just less than one drop. If 3 lugim falls into it, so then it is a problem. It makes a puzzle, and we said those 3 lugim have to look like water and have to be complete 3 lugim. But if it's not, then it's not. It doesn't puzzle. It's also, we said a mikveh it has to be lechatchila. We say it should be in the majority has to be has to be rainwater. Even if you have 40 sa and you took out and you added one shuvim and you went back and forth, nasan someone else saw, we learned about that. Then the lechatchila, we should try to be careful, like the Raiva, they shouldn't have more than 19 sa interchanging. Then we learned about that a mikveh has to keep its color, can't have wine or oil or something which you can change its color. We learned also that the water coming to mikveh has to come directly, it has to come not through a davar makabel tuma, and that's what we discussed about the pipes, and discussed also about how even if the zeichlim, the leak is higher than 40 sa, it should not be used until it's fixed. And we discussed about hashaka, how is the idea of connecting mayim shuvim to mayim which are not shuvim together to make kosher the water which is shuvim, and discuss the idea of hamshacha, of water which doesn't come directly from the rainwater, doesn't fall directly into the mikveh. We let it flow first on the ground until it comes into the mikveh in order to take care of the problem of gimalugin and of makabel tuma. Baruch Hashem, that's a crash course, how we will call it. Okay, so I'm ready to answer any questions if anyone has. Okay, so I wish everyone a wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure,
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Seid gesund.
Sei gesund, das ist okay.
Mel,
Correct, thank you.
Good chodesh. Good chodesh.
Hello?
yeah, we're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just waiting if anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to ask.
Well, if I wanted to build a mikveh, I would have questions right now. I'm not, not building a mikveh.
Okay.
But what about the mikveh when it clean? You know, to have this thing that cleans the water. The
Filter, you're talking about the filter.
When it's on, that's you can't really travel in that at the time when it's on, is
Right.
right?
The reason for that is because of zeichlim, because the water is it's like leaking. The water is not ashbeid, and the water is not staying in one place. The way what the filter does is the filter pumps out the water and takes out the water. So it's
not stable, in other words. It's not,
exactly, it's not stable. It's not bashbeid means it's not gathered in one place, not staying in that pit. It's leaving the pit and coming out. So that's applicable. I'm sorry.
but for a man, it's not. It shouldn't be a problem.
For men, it's also better. For men, it's also better to
better not to.
Yeah. It's just for shuvim. When it comes to men, tefillas keri, those are tefillas ezra. Those who are careful about tefillas ezra. So there's two things. There's tefillas ezra. People go when for about keri. And then there's miniga, which many people go before davening. Miniga,
like we do. Okay, yeah, right.
Right. So let's say, we're talking about tefillas ezra. So there's a lot of discussion in Shulchan Aruch about that. And over there it says that shuvim is okay. Shuvim is okay. It's not a problem to be from a keli. You cannot be toivel in a keli. But the water could come from shuvim. But zeichlim, it shouldn't be zeichlim. It's better not to be zeichlim. Now it's very negea also. This is negea in Corona time. This was very practical because people didn't go to mikveh, and maybe some people are still not. I don't know everyone's matzav, but there was a time that the mikvahs were closed. And so either a person, of course, could be table for tefillas ezra, could be table in a pool if they have. But if they don't have a pool and they don't have, a jacuzzi or something over there, so then there is something called tisha kabin. Tisha kabin means that you pour water on the amount of tisha kabin on your body.
Like a good shower, and like strong shower is probably okay.
So most poskim say that a shower, 2-3 minutes in a shower, is considered So that's basically what most people were doing in Corona time.
During the Corona.
So, but benigea zeichlim, so it's better not to do. Now benigea, the minhag going to mikveh before davening. So there's different opinions. Some people say it's just like tefillah says, but some people say that maybe it's the same thing, like a regular mikveh. It has to be a proper mikveh. So it's better if there's a mikveh available. So obviously, if someone wants to be mahadir, it's the best to use that. Best to use a mikveh.
There are people still afraid to go to the mikveh. I know. I was also afraid, but I found out I had antibodies. I went. That's the first thing I did. After I found out I have antibodies, I went to the. But
there was a time it was closed. There was a time it was closed.
Too. The women's mikvahs were open though. The women, they have to be.
They tried to institute different things that they should be cleaner, but
they okay.
Okay, by the way, benigea filter. So nowadays they have a new type of filter which doesn't have to pump out the water. It depends. Some places have something called a kosher filter, which is in the actual butter. So there's no shaila of zeichlim.
Oh, it doesn't move around, in other words.
It doesn't move around. It doesn't leave the mikveh. It stays inside the mikveh. So so you'll notice it in some of the mikvahs. You'll notice that they have like some interesting thing in the mikveh in the corner, and So it also has to make sure. Another thing with filters is that the water shouldn't come through a keli. Also, something also important. So usually most mikvahs don't have. Besides for men's mikvahs do use filters, but most women's mikvahs they change the water every day. They don't use a filter. In town, the ones in the big towns, in the big cities. But when you go out of town, so then many times they use a filter to pump out the water because it for cleanliness, especially shluchim,
Probably a very big problem for shluchim. Depending where you are, there's a lot of places that don't have mikvahs.
Right. Right, I'm saying you're gonna have somebody who's never went to mikveh before, and you're trying to convince them to go to mikveh. They want to know that the water is extra clean, crystal clean for them. Shouldn't keep them away from doing that. But if possible, the best thing is to get this kosher mikveh, kosher filter. It's still developing. There's different types of them. There's the famous Montreal one, and there's another one being built. There's different ones being built. So filters is a big topic, hot topic. But the regular mikvahs and don't have that filter which pumps it out. I'm saying, I know in Karnites at least they don't have that in the mikvahs in Karnites. But yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we say a mikveh is the union of bittul, right? Bittul, the kavanis a mikveh is the person surrounded totally by the water. The person should be table and mehadas atar. The Rambam says the person immerses in chassidus and Torah. That's bittul. That's the union of the person. Yeah. Okay, I guess it's okay to everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Shana Teva Masukah.
Amen. Amen.
Okay.
Melech Basada. Now is the time.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Okay.
First, the Melech have to.
Sorry.
The Melech have to go to the mikveh.
Oh, don't talk about that Melech. The Melech doesn't need a mikveh. Okay. Have a good night, everybody. Good night.